Hello, readers and writers. I'm MJ, and today let's talk about Goodreads' list for the 60 most popular fantasy books of the last 3 years. So I know Goodreads lists can be controversial, but they're also kind of fun to look at to see which fantasy books they've selected to be on this list and how many of them I have read. So let's go ahead and take a look. All right, here we are with their list. And we're going to go ahead and start off with Babel by R.F. Kuang. I have read Babel. I really enjoyed it. R.F. Kuang is definitely one of my favorite authors now. And this is a look at Chinese culture, United Kingdom culture, language, and colonization in general. And it's a great read and an intense read at the exact same time. I highly recommend it. The next, we have Under the Whispering Door. I've read this as well. It is a cozy fantasy. It's okay. I didn't love it or hate it. Next is Stephen King, Fairy Tale. And I have not read this, but I do own it. I own the ebook of it, and I do plan on picking it up. I am not big on horror, but from what I understand, Fairy Tale is more speculative fiction, and I have enjoyed some of Stephen King's speculative fiction. Although I try and stay far away from his horror because I'm just too much of a wuss. And next, Daughter of the Moon Goddess. I have not read this, but again, I own this, and so it's on my TBR to be read. So far, 2 out of 4. All right, next up, we have The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. I have not only not read this, I'm not sure I've heard of it or not. It may be the one where this witch starts a YouTube channel, but I'm not sure if that's the case. But I have not read it. I don't know if I'm going to read it because I'm not very much into fantasy romance, but at the same time, I like reading about witches, so I guess we'll see. Legends and Lattes. So I was not going to pick this up until I was convinced that this is not a romantasy. It is actually really is a cozy fantasy, and I have picked it up. I'm about 50% of the way through the book. I read it on audio through the library, and I had to turn the load back in. I'm just not reading via audiobook a lot right now, which is really interesting since the first part of the year, that's all I read. So I'm waiting to actually get the ebook from the library and switch over to the ebook to finish it out. But I'm actually really enjoying it and really glad that I was convinced to pick it up. Hellbent by Leigh Bardugo. This is the second book in the Alex Stern series. I have read it. I love this series, and I can't wait for the third book to come out. If it hasn't come out, I'm pretty sure I would know if it has come out. And then next we have Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. I think I've seen this around, but I have not read it yet. I haven't even looked into it to know exactly what it is about. So right now I'm at 3.5 books. Next, we have She Who Became the Sun. This is the first book in the Radiant Empire series. The second book is out. I have read this first book. I'm not sure I'm going to pick up the second book. I have differing thoughts on this. I am trans, and I believe the author is also non-binary trans, and the rap is often seen as trans representation, but it seemed to me to be more representation based upon convenience rather than identity, and I'm not a huge fan of that because it kind of tends to imply that transness is chosen. So while the writing was great, the historical aspect of it was great, the trans representation was not my favorite. I am not like not every person feels the same way. And so I respect people that completely disagree with me, but that is definitely how it came across to me. So I probably will not be continuing on in the series. Next, we have Tress and the Emerald Sea. I have read this. This is the first of Brandon Sanderson's secret novels. I thought it was really different from what he had written previously, and I really enjoyed that. And I would recommend this for other people to read as well. It was an enjoyable book. Probably not like my favorite fantasy book, but it was enjoyable. Next is Book of Night by Holly Black. I like this. I know not everyone did, but this is definitely the type of fantasy I really enjoy. I really enjoy when these popular YA authors come back and do adult fantasy because I definitely appreciate the adult fantasy aspect more than the YA aspect. And so when the second book comes out, or I realize the second book comes out, it's one that I'm going to continue on with the series. And on this row, the last book is Starling House by Alex Harrow, and I have read this. I really enjoyed it. It is gothic fantasy, just enough gothic aspect without it being so, without it really being horror. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it. I really like their books, their novels, their novellas. I have not enjoyed as much, just because they had like the Sleeping Beauty ones, and I did try reading those, and they were not something that I enjoyed. So 6.5, I think at this point that I've read. Next, we have A Day of the Fallen Night. I have not read this. I have read Samantha Shannon's other book, Prior to the Orange Tree, and it was not for me. So I made the conscious choice to not pick this back up. Nettle and Bone, I have not read either. However, I have heard about it. I've heard really good things. So this is one that I would definitely consider picking up. A River Enchanted, I did read. I will not be continuing in the series. There was nothing like about the book that I found like wrong or bad. I just didn't enjoy it enough to want to seek out the next book in the series. It was just fine. But I'm would also really respect people that really enjoyed it. The Familiar I have read. This is probably not Lee Bardugo's greatest work, mostly because as soon as I finished reading it, I completely forgot what it was about, and I haven't remembered. Um, so it is pretty forgettable for me. But that does leave me at 8.5 books read. Empire of the Vampire is the first book in the Empire of the Vampire series. I have read this. I know a lot of people really like this book and this series, and I did not. I thought the main character was very much an alpha male, which I don't particularly enjoy, that toxic kind of masculinity in books. And I think that the writing was not as great as I would have hoped. There was a lot of really cliche metaphors in it, and it just wasn't as clear and crisp writing as I would have liked. It actually has made me reconsider whether I want to keep his other books on my shelf. I do plan to go back and reread them to see if I do plan on actually keeping any more of his books on my shelf, but I will not be continuing with the series. The Will of the Mini, I have not read. I don't even think I have heard of it. So if you've read it, let me know if it's good and if I should put it on my TBR. The Adventures of Amala al-Sharif. I have this book to read. It's packed away in one of my TBR boxes. So I will be picking it up when I unbox whatever box it's in. I have heard fantastic things about it, and I really do want to read this. So I'm excited to pick it up when I finally get it unboxed. The Cartographers. So I DNF'd The Cartographers. I had it on my shelf. I picked it up to start reading it. It wasn't exactly catching my attention, and then somebody who is actually a cartographer was telling me that the science in it is actually extremely bad, and I don't handle that very well. So I did decide to DNF it. So this actually leaves me at 10 and a half books read and 2 books that I have DNF'd, either the book or the entire series. All right, next we have Stoneblind by Natalie Hines. I have not read this. There's a lot of mythology books on this list, and I do not necessarily actively go seek out these types of books, but I do read them. Not maybe in high quantities, but definitely at least to some extent. And of the ones, Stoneblind is one that does interest me because, I mean, Medusa's pretty awesome. So I may end up picking this one up, but I do not own it, so it's definitely not the highest priority for me. The Graduate, I have not read either. This is the second book in the series. I haven't read the first book in the series either. I'm on the fence whether I should read this. I was not a fan of Naomi Novik's Dragon series, but I did read her other standalones and I enjoyed them. I don't know if I'll go back and reread them, but I did enjoy them the first time I read through them. So I'm on the fence of whether I should pick the series up or not. I've heard a lot of mixed things about it, so I would really love your feedback on whether I should read it. The Atlas Paradox. So this is the second book in this series. There are 3 books. I read the first 2 books in the series, so I have read the Atlas Paradox. And after the second book, I decided I was not going to continue on with the series. It just wasn't engaging enough for me to continue to pick it up and to have a place on my TBR shelf. So I just unhauled the entire series. But I have read the second book. And Clytemnestra, I'm probably saying that very wrong. I have this on my TBR, but I have not read it yet. It is packed up in one of my TBR boxes. So again, when I unpack whatever box it's in, I will pick it up then. So right now it looks like I'm at 11 and a half books read and 2 books. Well, yeah, 2 books that I have DNF'd the book or the series. All right, The Book Eaters. I love The Book Eaters. I know it's got some mixed reviews on it, but I think at least partially that's because it is an autistic author with autistic rep in the book, and we tend to get a lot of mixed reviews. As an autistic author, I can definitely relate to that. But I love this book. It is gothic vibes to it. I've been meaning to reread it, and now I might actually wait until it gets closer to fall so I can get the right vibes for the book, because I didn't do it before I ended up moving. But yeah, this book is fantastic, and if you have not read it, I highly recommend that you pick it up. And the next one is When We're Dragons. I haven't read this at all. I don't know if I've even heard of it. So if you've read it, let me know. Cassandra Clare Swordcatcher, I have not read. I know this is the first book in a new series. I I don't know if I'm going to pick it up or not. I'm not like opposed to picking it up. I've read some Cassandra Clare, but my adolescence was really before she became popular, so I don't have any real nostalgia with her. So I've enjoyed some of her books, but I haven't like made a conscious choice to go read all of them. So I don't know if I'm gonna pick this one up or not. And V. Schwab's The Fragile Threads of Power. This is the first book in the second part of a series. And so you really do have to read the first trilogy before you read this book because there's so much build up. But I do really enjoy this book. I love that there's error based representation in the book. The queen is aromantic and asexual and is still married and still had a child. And I love that representation because it's a very personal representation to myself and is not seen in a very many books at all. The characters in here are all very morally gray. So unless you love rooting for a morally great character, you may not root for the characters as much, but you enjoy reading about them. At least I do. I know this series isn't for everyone, but I love it. All right, so that is another 2 books read. So we are at 13 and a half books and 2 DNFs. All right, Mark Lawrence, The Book That Would Burn. I went on a big Mark Lawrence binge a couple years ago, and I really haven't picked up a book of his since. I will probably at some point. I am not a huge fan of his early books, and that does kind of stop me from picking up his later books, even though I don't find his later books to have the same, again, very alpha, problematic women representation as his later books do. So I do think he's grown as an author. And which is why I will probably pick up his books, but I'm also not like rushing out to read his newest ones. Jennifer Saint, I read, I think, her first book, but I have not read Electra. I would pick it up if the opportunity presented itself, but I'm not sure I'm going to go out of my way to read it per se. I don't own it. Ink Blood Sister Scribe. I've heard really, really good things about this book and this series. I believe it's going to be a series. So I definitely want to read this one. But I don't own it yet. So there's that. The Lost Metal. I haven't read this. So this is the 7th book in the Mistborn series. It's the 4th book of the second part of the series. I finished the first 3 books, but I haven't started on the next part of the series yet. Last year was my year of Sanderson, where I was really reading Sanderson's backlist books, and I got through almost everything he's written except for this last Mistborn series. And I just stopped, and I haven't picked it back up. I don't own The Lost Metal, but I do own the first 3 books, I think, or or really close to that. And it's just I needed a break from him before I read him again. But now that it's been over, well, about 8 months since I last picked up one of his books, I do plan on picking back up The Mistborn soon. So of those, I actually haven't read any of them. So we're still at 13 and a half and 2 DNFs. A Marvelous Light is fantastic. It's a gay historical romance that I enjoyed a lot. I know I'm not huge on romance, but occasionally I will find ones that I just love. And I do really love this book. I own the next 2 books in the series that I do need to pick up. Kayakai, I have read. This is a very popular book for aromantic rep, and it's really great for that. I understand why a lot of people really love this book, and I wish I was one of them. But the reason I don't love this book is very particular to myself. In the writing style, there is very blunt foreshadowing. I mean, I don't even know if at this point it's foreshadowing. The narrator tells you what's going to happen long before it happens. And then I got horrible anxiety waiting for the events to actually happen. And that is most definitely the autistic portion of myself that could not handle this type of narration style. It just wasn't for me. I was so anxious reading this book that I just couldn't enjoy it, which makes me really sad. So I still would recommend it to most people, but if you have that same sort of anxiety, then this is not going to be a book for you. God Killer is on my TBR, my physical TBR. I believe it's actually in the box that I unboxed, and I may have put it on my August TBR. I have to double check. And so it's one that I will hopefully be picking up soon. The Last Tale of the Flower Bride. I have heard of this, not a lot, just enough to know that it exists. I do really like this author, and so that definitely makes me want to pick it up even more, but I don't own it, so I'm not sure exactly when I'm going to be picking it up. But now we're at 15 and a half books read and 2 series or books DNF'd. Keeper of the Enchanted Rooms, I have read. It was definitely cute, cozy fantasy. I do plan on reading the rest of the series. I probably need to go back and reread the first book just to make sure that I remember everything that happened, but I'm totally down for that because it was just a comforting little fantasy book. Well, I don't want to say little because that sounds kind of demeaning, but it was fun. It was a fun read. The Book of Doors, I have never heard of before this list, but I love this cover so much that it's going to bump up on my TBR. I mean, just look how fantastic it looks. And it's like, I don't know, the description of it um is like, I just think this book is definitely made for me as a reader. So it's one I really want to pick up. Oh, Immortal Longings. I've read this book. I was so disappointed in this book. Um, immensely disappointed. It should have been edited better than it was. It probably was rushed to try and get money while the author was still very popular. And I do think that the publisher failed this book because there was blatant plot holes that should have been fixed. And it makes me really sad how much I feel like the arts can be lost for money. Now, that's not to say like writers, we still need to eat, but it, yeah, in this case, it was definitely one of those books that I felt like the author got failed by the publisher. Atlantia is another book on this list by Jennifer Saint. And of the 2 of her books on this list, this is one I probably would want to pick up more just because Atlantis is fascinating. And I don't know, this one just sounds more fun, but maybe I don't even know what it's about. So maybe it's just the name and the cool cover. Very possible. All right, so now at 17 and a half books read and 2 books or series DNF. The Change I have not read. I haven't even heard about it, but it looked interesting. So, I mean, if I see it around, I may pick it up. The Startup Thief I do own on ebook, and it's one I will probably pick up sooner rather than later, because I have been eyeing it and have been meaning to pick it up pretty soon. Ordinary Monsters, I have not read. I'm not sure if I'm going to read it or not. I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to reading it, but I don't necessarily have my eye on it. And kind of the same thing for Thistlefoot. I mean, I don't know that I'm like dying to read it, but I'm also not opposed to picking it up. So no additional books read. The Inheritance of Orquídea Divina, I have read. I really loved this book. And I actually started to go back to read the author's backlist. I read Mexicana Gothica, and DNF'd it. So I was really sad. So now I don't know how I will feel about this author's works moving forward, because this one I thought was fantastic. I have not read the Book of Magic or anything by Alice Hoffman, and this is definitely something I would like to change moving forward. So I think adding Alice Hoffman to my fall TBR this year would be really good. I have heard nothing about the Tainted Cup. I've seen nothing about the Tainted Cup. So I don't know if I want to read this or not. I will say I'm not the biggest fan of this cover. What do you think? Do you like it? Um, Broken Blade, I also haven't seen. I don't know, looking at the cover, if this is adult or YA. It's possibly something I could enjoy, or it's possibly something I would really not enjoy. I think it could go either way. I'd have to actually look at the book more to see what I think about it. But now we're at 18 and a half books read. Witch King, I've started. So I've read about halfway through this book and I put it down. And it's no fault of the book at all. It just happened. And I just haven't picked it back up yet. And right now it's packed in my TBR boxes. So when it finally gets unboxed, I'll pick it back up. But until then, it's going to remain at half read. But I really do want to read all of Martha Wells' fantasy that they're re-releasing, because I really do like her as an author. I've never heard of The Warm Hands of Ghosts. Um, I'm not sure that this is necessarily a book that I will enjoy, but I think I would be open to reading it, especially if people really think that I should. Her Majesty's Royal Coven is one that I have on my TBR. I don't own it, but I have it on hold at the library. I've only read Juno Dawson's first nonfiction book, which I didn't really like, but I think I know why I didn't really like it, because she ended up transitioning after she wrote that first book, and it makes a lot of sense. Um, and so I really want to read her other nonfiction book that she's written since then, as well as this fantasy, which I was really excited to find out that she had written. And The Frugal Wizard's Handbook for Surviving Medieval England by Brandon Sanderson. I've read this. I loved this book. I think it's the best of his secret novels. Obviously, whether you agree or not is going to depend on which type of fantasy you like, but this is more a humoristic type of fantasy, and it was just such a fun read. And so if you like more humorous type of fantasy, then I highly suggest that you pick this one up. And that leaves us at 19 books read. So not bad. The Spear Cuts to the Water. I have no idea what this is about at all. Um, None. So yeah, I don't know. If you know anything about it, let me know. The Sunlit Man, I've read. Again, this is the last of Sanderson's secret novels. This book, I didn't get. It's part of his Cosmere universe, and it has some of the same characters as his epic fantasy series that he has going on. Um, but I felt like such a poser because I didn't instantly understand where I was supposed to, like, where this world fits, what I was supposed to know about it. So it's like, even though I've read so much of Sanderson's works, and especially up to this point, because it was the last secret novel released, and I've been reading his books all year, and to feel so lost coming into this book, just, I don't know, it made me feel like a poser. So I didn't really enjoy it, honestly. A Short Walk Through a Wide World. Um, I have not read this, but the description really does make me want to pick it up. The Invisible Life of Audie LaRue meets Life of Pi. I mean, I don't know. That just sounds like an interesting like combination. So it is one that I would definitely be interested in reading. Nora Roberts' The Choice. This is the third book in the series. I read the first book of the series and was very disappointed in it, and decided that I was not going to continue on in the series. Um, so this is definitely one that's going on my DNF. So we're at 20 books read and 3 DNFs. All right, we are almost done. So the last row, Victory City, I know nothing about at all. I would be interested in picking it up. I've read a few science fiction books that were based in India, trying to just read a little bit more outside of American uh, authors, and I really, really enjoyed them. But I don't know if I've really read any fantasy from India, so I think this would be a really good one to try. Jade Legacy. This is the third book in the Greenbone Saga. I have read it. I did enjoy it. I did like the entire trilogy. I know it's hit or miss for people, but for me, it was definitely a hit. I enjoy it, and I have the special editions of them on my shelf behind me. Thornhedge. I don't know what this one's about either. Um, so I have heard nothing about it, so I don't know. The World We Make is the second book in N.K. Jemisin's Great Cities series, and I have an unpopular opinion about this series. Um, I love N.K. Jemisin. I think she is one of the best authors ever. Her Broken Earth trilogy is one of the best series ever, and I would say that the second book in that series may be the best book ever written, in my opinion. But the first book of the Great Cities was not my favorite for two reasons. The first one being that I felt, again, that the editor had felt the author, that in the development of it could have been made a lot tighter, but since N.K. Jemisin is a fantastic author and very popular, that maybe it didn't get suggested. Um, but also, I've never been to New York, and so I have no connection to New York at all. And so I just felt very lost in all of this world building. Um, and so, yeah, so it wasn't something that I enjoyed, and I ended up deciding not to continue on in the series. So it's gonna have to go in one of the DNF piles. So in total, of the 60 books that they have suggested, I've only read 21 of them. So not a lot less than I thought I had. And I DNF'd the series or the book of 4 of them, so 25. I expected that my number was going to be higher. I'm not going to lie. But 60 books is a lot of books to read. So I'm interested in which of these books are your favorite? Which books do you think were missing from this list? Keeping in mind that it's only for the past 3 years. And which of these books that I haven't read do you think that I should pick up? Because I definitely am always looking for your opinion on what I should read next. But thank you for joining me to go through these books. I really appreciate it. And as always, keep writing, keep reading, and until next time.